Wes McDermott. This is the fourth video in Chapter 2. In this video, we're going to take a look at the game view as well as the console. Okay, so like I said, we're going to take a look at the game view. So here we have our scene view we've been talking about in the last video, and then here is another tab. Here's our game view. Again, if we go up to window, you can see that that's part of our window here. It's a game view. And what we're going to do to start is I kind of like to have my game view and my scene view available together. So I'm just going to left click and drag out to basically detach my game view, and I'm going to go ahead and snap that over here to the left. So now I have both my scene view and my game view together. And so here you can see the game view is on the left and the scene view is on the right, and this is typically how I work in my projects. And so what we want to do to start is we want to set our aspect. So at the game view window, the first thing we see here is our aspect. So if I click on this little drop down widget here, you can see that we've got the free aspect as well as a couple different aspect ratios. And then finally, the last option you're going to see is the resolution for the game that you're working at. So for instance, we're looking at Angry Bots again. Its resolution is set to 1280 by 720. So let's go ahead and select this, and you can see that the game view is going to go ahead and fit that aspect ratio. And as if I go ahead and just kind of move my mouse right over to this middle divider here, you can see the icon changes, and I can left click and drag this left or right to resize this. And this view is also going to resize as we kind of change the UI. So if we want to expand our project browser, we can do so. And so as it expands that view, however, it's going to match itself to that aspect ratio, which at 1280 by 720 is a 16 by 9 aspect ratio. So I like to keep this locked at that resolution. So our game view is exactly what it says. It is the view of our game. This is what the player is going to see. So for instance, here in our 3D view, so you can see that we can actually navigate around our scene view and also look at our game view. If I go ahead and select this camera here, and I'm going to go ahead and hit W on the keyboard to go move us into a translation view. And right now we're set in a world, so let's go ahead and change that from world. Let's go ahead and change that to local. Now you can see that the transform widget aligns itself to the position or the orientation of the camera. And as we start to move this, you can see that as we start to move our camera, we're actually changing the view of the player. And again, as we mentioned in the previous view, our scene view is also giving this little mini camera view here that we can see in case our game view is obscured. So as you can see, again, the game view is just what the player is going to see. So we can actually set that resolution or what aspect ratio we want to work at. We also have an option to hit maximize on play. So we haven't talked about the play controls yet, but we have a couple controls here for playing and pausing the game. So if we actually want to go ahead and play test our game or check out what we've been doing so far, we can hit this play button. And if we do not have maximize on play check, so let's go ahead and just hit the play button, and you can see that our game is now working. And you can see that we can actually see the player view as well as the scene view here. Now, if you'll notice, we've got some user interface or GUI type elements that are coming over in our game view. Now, this is actually coming into play via a code component on a game object. We don't see that in our 3D view. However, we can see that here in our game view. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just turn this off. So I'm just going to hit that play button again. If I have maximize on play and I hit play again, that's going to maximize our entire viewport here so that we can see this. So now we'll just turn this off again. You can see our viewport then goes back to normal. So something else, I'm going to go ahead and leave maximize on play off. So something else that's actually very handy, so I'm just going to go ahead and resize my game view here so we can see this a little bit better, is we've got this stats window. And so what the statistics window does is it gives us some very, very good information about our game. So we can look at, we've got our main thread. It's giving us a time in milliseconds. It's basically giving us our draw call, so it's telling us how many draw calls this is taking. We can see how many triangles, and it may be a little hard to see in this video, but given this scene of what the camera's rendering at this point, we've got 8.8 thousand triangles, about 10,500 vertices that are rendering in this scene right now. So it's a really good way to check the optimization of your game. We also have some information about texture memory, VRAM, shadows, and how many visible skin meshes and how many animations are taking place. So let's go ahead and hit play on this. And you can see that these numbers will update in real time as things start to change. So something else that we can do is we'll go ahead and turn this off. So this number will actually change as well as while we're working in our scene view here without actually having to play the game. So let's just say that I take this camera and I start to move it here, and let's just put it in a place where we're not seeing as many vertices. So let's start to just change this guy up here. So you can see as I start to move this, our triangle count and our draw count is going to be changing as I start to change this, or I start to translate my camera. So if I move this up, let's go ahead and hit E on the keyboard to rotate. And let's just rotate it completely up out of view. You can see that now our triangle count is and our vert count is lowered dramatically. And what we're actually probably being able to look at is how many triangles and vertices this skybox is going to be taking into account. So as we start to pull this camera back down into our view, you can start to see how our triangle count and everything like that is starting to change. Let me just undo that and just get our camera back into its default position. One of the things that's really interesting about our camera is that it's actually doing some culling. So any of these objects that are not visible to the camera are not going to be rendered for us. But however, if we do have parts of a model that are visible in the camera, but then most of those, or if it's all part of one object and some of that is still off scene, it's still going to render those vertices off scene because you are seeing a part of it. So it can't like take an entire mesh and kind of break that down and then say, okay, well, I'm only going to render these verts that are part of this entire mesh. It has to take the whole mesh. And now there's other things that we can do to optimize this by using some of Unity Pro's occlusion culling features and stuff. But what I want to do is just bring that to your attention. So the stats window is very good. It's something that you'll use often, especially when checking the performance of your game and going through and just trying to gauge how the performance is going to be. So we'll just turn this button off to turn off the statistics window. And then we also have this gizmo. So just as we had the gizmo settings here in our 3D view, we also have those in our console, or excuse me, our game view. So you can see that I can just turn these off. And so that may, in our game view, we may not want to see all of this, all these gizmos and things like that. I can actually click this little drop down arrow and you can see that we can actually change the size, and all of the things that we covered in the previous video of the 3D scene are also available to us in our game view. So for instance, our game view, I'll typically just go ahead and leave these gizmos off because I don't really want to see that in that view. And so the other thing that we want to really cover within this video is our console window, because a lot of times when you're actually playing your game and you're running through this, you can actually start to check some of your console and some of your debug type things. So what we're going to do is you still utilizing our default layout, our console window could be down in this section here. If it's not, if you don't see this in your view when you open Unity, you can go up here to the window and you can choose console. And again, the console you can tear this off and place this anywhere in the UI that you want. I usually tend to keep this kind of just down this way. I've got my project browser and my console. So when I start to actually run my game and I'm testing and things like that, I'll keep my console here. And what the console is going to do is it's going to give us a couple things. It's going to let us output values from our scripts, so we can actually log errors. We can print out variables and different types of information so we can kind of see what's going on. And then also any errors in our scene are going to show up here. So let's just produce an error really quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to my project tab and I'm going to do favorite search through all scripts. And I'm just going to grab this auto fire script. So I'm just randomly grabbing one of these guys. I'm just going to double click this, and that's going to load that script into Unity's mono development. So this is mono development, and this is the environment that you actually use to write your scripts in. Now we haven't covered mono develop or anything like that, but we'll talk about that at a later time. But for now, what we want to do is I want to just mess something up with this script. So I'm just going to come over to this line 27 here, and I'm just going to comment this out. So I'm going to do 2 backslashes here, or excuse me, 2 forward slashes, and we're going to comment this out, and it's going to cause an error. And I'm going to save this script, and now I'm going to go back over to Unity, and you can see that right now I've got this little error that's showing up here at the bottom of the UI. If I go back over to my console tab, we can see that we now have this error that's showing up, and we can actually just turn that off. Now it's not actually disabling the error, but it's actually removing that from our console view. You can see that error is still available at the bottom, but if we turn that button back on, we can see here's our error, and if we select it, we can get some information about this guy. Now if I want to try to fix this error, this is the way I work a lot of time in my scripts. Like if there's something going on with my script, I'll see something like this. All I've got to do is just double click that comment, and what it's going to do, it's going to take me to that portion in my code if the error is driven by a script error, and it's going to show me, hey, this is where I'm having a problem. Now I know that that's a problem because I actually commented out the first part of this function here, so it's this here. So let's just uncomment that, and we'll save that, and we'll jump back over to Unity. Unity, and you can see that as soon as that kind of recompiles here, our error goes away, and now that we're cleared. So these three buttons here, the first one's going to basically say any type of comments. I want to show comments. The middle one here is going to show warnings. So those aren't really errors per se, but they're just things that letting you know, hey, this could potentially be an issue. I'm not going to crash or fail the game or anything over it, but I'm not really real keen on it. And then finally, you do have your error output. So you can turn these guys off, so none of these items will be logged to the console, or you can turn them all on. And I typically will leave these guys on. So again, with the console, you can clear, you can collapse, clear on play. So if you had some stuff that was out here, as soon as you hit play, it's going to clear everything before it plays. So you kind of have like a fresh console before you go there. And then this error on pause is like if you are logging out an error, so a log error, and I'll show you that here in just a moment. But we'll talk about that. It will actually pause when it actually hits that error. So one of the things that we'll do is let's go back over to MonoDevelop here, and I'm going to take a look at this game over GUI. So let's go back to Unity and let's just hit play real quick. You can see that our game plays, the character runs out, there's an explosion takes place, and then finally we have this little GUI window shows up here. And so that GUI window, if I go ahead and turn that off, and I kind of start to look through my hierarchy, so where's that coming from? So just to show you a little bit about how you might kind of check out a scene is where did that come from? So let's just kind of scroll through our scene here and take a look. Here we go. We have this game over GUI object, so that actually named this very well, so we know what it is. And again, as we mentioned in the very first chapter video, this is just a game object, and the game object has a component attached to it, and that component is this game over script. So what I would do at this point is I'd come over to my inspector, I'd see that there's a game over GUI script attached, and here it is. And all I got to do if I want to actually view this in MonoDevelop is you just double click this guy, and it's going to load up here in MonoDevelop. And so what I want to do is I want to show you how you can actually output information to the console that'll help you during a debugging situation. And this is the way I work a lot. There's a couple different ways that you can debug inside of Unity. You can actually write out debug messages right here to the console. You can use the debugger, or you can also take a look at console files, which we'll talk about here in just a moment as well. But so say I go over to MonoDevelop, and if I wanted to, I could actually set some breakpoints in here. So let's say that I wanted to see what this guy does. I can actually set a breakpoint within this, and then I can actually run this into debug mode, and I can actually step through my code as I'm playing my game. Just a typical debugger that you would find in most programs. So for example, breakpoint set here, what I can do is I'm going to debug this guy. So we've got debug. I'm going to come over to attach process. It's this little button I'm going to click here in the MonoDevelop UI, and I've got a couple processes. So I have Unity editors already open. I'm going to select this guy, and it's going to the Unity debugger here, and that's what I have going to attach to. So I'm going to attach this process, and now you can see that we are now in basically attached MonoDevelop to the Unity editor. Let's jump back over to Unity, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit play. And the first thing that happens is the game pauses itself right at this breakpoint. And now I can actually step into this code and I can kind of check and see what's going on. So I can see that here's the local variables. I can actually start to kind of really just step through and see what's happening, what variables, what objects are initialized and things like that. So your typical debug type situations. So now I'm just going to go ahead and detach that process. We'll go back to Unity and we'll pause that. And so that's how that works. Let's remove this breakpoint. So I'm just going to right click on this, and I'm going to go ahead and say clear all breakpoints. So we're going to remove that. And so what I want to show you is how kind of I typically will work through this kind of stuff. So I don't really go through it that much. I kind of just do this kind of manual process a lot of times. So what I want to do is at the end, I basically want to, when the user presses the end game or restart button, I want to go through and I want to go through this guy, and I want to push some information out to the console. So let's see how we would just do that. So I'm going back over here. I've got the game over GUI game object selected. I'm looking at this script and I'm seeing, okay, well, this script's taking a couple values here. Now I know this, we haven't talked about scripts, so don't worry so much about following it. Like, oh, I don't know what's going on. This just kind of we're basically talking about what we've already covered as far as we have a game object and we're applying, textures to this guy. Or we're setting values here on this game object's component. And so I see that there's a restart button. So and this is obviously labeled for me restart, and I see this restart button. So, okay, that gives me a clue. So I'm going to go back over to MonoDevelop here. And at the very top of this script, it looks like, sure enough, they have this public texture 2D restart button. And in scripting, this is public, so it means that anything you put public in a variable is going to be available to the script in the editor, so you can give things values or attach other elements or whatever you want to reference in that script to that public variable. So I see here, oh, it's a restart button. Okay, so what I'm going to do here in MonoDevelop is going to hit Apple F. So I think it's Control F on a PC here, and I'm just going to start to click in here. Let's do restart button. So let's just label this guy real quick, and here's one of two. So let's just go ahead and click this down arrow. It's going to take me to the next one. So I can see here in this code, and this is actually driven by Unity's just default kind of built-in onGUI system, and you can see here that they're implementing this onGUI function. So I'm going to pull this down, and I can see that it's got this little statement here. Don't worry if you have no idea what this does, but I can tell that this is this else if with this restart button, this is basically going to give me some information. And what I have placed in here is this debug.log. And so finally, after all that explanation, we're getting to the part of the that actually refers to the console. But we've got debug.log. Okay, and so if you ever use this debug.log, you can actually log or print out information from your code to your console. And like I said before, this is typically the way I work. I don't really go through and make all these breakpoints and attach the process and do all this stuff. I'll just say, hey, I want to know what this variable is. I'm just going to output this. So in this case, what we're going to do, and let me just show you how that starts to work. So if I wanted to type this, I would just come in and I would start to say debug. So debug shows up. We got this IntelliSense, so it kind of knows. I'm going to hit the enter key. I'm going to hit a dot period, and then I'm going to start typing log. Now here are the things that we can do. We can log warnings, exceptions, errors, and log. So I just want to log a message. And I'm going to do a parenthesis here. And what's the message? Well, I'm just going to just say a string here. So I'm just going to say, well, here, we've already done this. We'll just, just kind of showing you how that works. But we got debug.log, restart button is pressed. Now I'm going to save this script. And I'm going to jump back over to Unity. I'm going to hit the play button here. And so the game will start to play. So now, here we are. We're wanting to test our script or whatever. We want to see if that button's pressed. And so the game's ended. Now this GUI window comes up. And when I hit this restart button, you can see that, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the pause button this time. So instead of turning the game off, what I did was I hit the pause button. And that essentially just pauses the game. So it's just like if you're playing a game on your console and you hit the start button to pause it. And so you can see here that that message here, it did a Unity engine.debug.log was basically dispatched out of a script, and you can see that it's basically right here the comment. So again, if I turn that button off, I wouldn't see it. So if for some reason, if you're doing some type of logging and you don't see anything, just remember here in your console window that could be the problem. So here we go, restart button pressed, and if you'll recall, jump back over, that's exactly what I actually typed in here. And so instead of this debug.log, I could have done something else. Let's say, let's just go ahead and turn this guy off. So instead of that, let's just say like, well, I'm going to say, let's just do restart button type. All right, and I'll do a colon there, and I'll do a space. Just so we can have a little space here. I'm going to hit a plus because I want to add something to this. So I'm going to basically I want to see well what is this restart button here. So let's just type this guy in. This is some type of this is a variable that we know that was set, that public variable at the top of our script. So just real quick, we'll scroll up and you can see that here it is. It's right there. It's a public texture 2D. So let's go back down to line 150 there. You can see, so in this case, what I'm doing is I'm logging out, and I'm trying to find out whatever this restart button is. So we'll save this, and we'll come back over to Unity, and we'll hit play, and we'll start to play this game. And when we click that restart button, you'll see that we'll be able to actually output what that is. So here we go. Let's click the restart button. We're going to hit pause. So I've paused the game, and this says restart button type colon, which we write, and it says restart, and it's part of Unity Engine.texture2D. So what I was wanting to do in that case was just trying to see what is this restart button? What type is that? It's of type. And we'll come back to Unity here. It's of type a texture 2D, which we knew that from we kind of scroll really quick back up to the top of the script, you can see that here it is. We set it as a texture 2D. Now again, I know I'm kind of speeding through all this scripting stuff. Don't worry about that. It's just the nature of the crash course. But what you can see there is, and what I want to show is how this console window works. And so, like I told you before, we actually just paused our game. What we could do is, if you're also trying to debug and log start things, you can actually step through your game frame by frame, and that's what this next button here does. So as we start to just click this button, you can see that I'm actually stepping through this frame by frame. And this has a lot of use, not only through scripting, but also, let's just say that I wanted to test this animation. So let's say we start to kind of scroll into this guy, and I'm trying to test to see how well this animation loops. So I might want to kind of focus. Here, we'll select this guy. We'll hit F on the keyboard to kind of focus in where I can kind of rotate around this guy. And then what I do is I'm just going to frame by frame step through this, and you can kind of really get a good idea of how this guy's animating. Maybe you're wanting to make sure that an animation loop cycle is working correctly or something like that. So that's something that you can do there as well. But again, the big thing with being able to debug your unities, like I said before, you got basically three ways. You can you can just log out messages. Let's see, where are we? Here we go. Just like we did here before, where we were able to log. And this is typically the way I work. We can go up and attach the process like we did before and actually set some breakpoints and step through all this type of code. Or what you can do, another thing is here, we'll go ahead and just turn this guy off. And so if we go over to our little triangle drop down guy over here, which again, like I told you, he's all over the UI and different, it's always on the right hand side of one of these views. You can see that we have an option here for open player log and open editor log. So this gives you even more information. So let's go ahead and open this editor log. And I'm on a Mac here, so it's just going to open in the console. But what that's going to do is give you all kinds of information about what's going on in this editor log. So if there's some reason, or if you really want to get in and try to look at something that's going wrong in your scene, you can actually just view the actual editor log. So everything that's happening from the editor. And then also you can, let's close that out and take a look at the player. So we can do the same thing and open up the player log. That's a lot less information, but we can go through and take a look at some stuff. So we can see as we go through, we can see some messages and things that are going on. So we can see, we scroll to the top, we can see OpenGL, we can see some OpenGL type information happening here. As we start to scroll around, we can see that where's some good information here. We can see now that we're unloading one unused asset to reduce memory. Loaded objects now are at 3,191, and you can kind of view what's going on as you kind of look through this. And this could be a handy way that you're actually, or some way that you're kind of looking what's going on, and that's part of your player log. So it's another way to kind of gauge, performance and things like that within your game. And then finally, we talked about this error pause. So what that'll do is if we were actually in our Unity editor here and we were actually doing some debug dot, if you're doing like a log error and and you have this set up to log some type of error, so when an error happens, I want to log this specific message. What Unity will do is if error on pause, if it hits that error, it will actually pause of the game at that point of that error pause. And so it's up to you how you want to use that. Honestly, what I do is it's probably pretty old school. Like I said, I don't use any of the I don't use the debugger. I don't use error pause. I never use any of these logs or anything like that. Basically, what I do is I'll just go through and just hand if I can get MonoDevelop open here, I'll just go through and just log out what I want to know. So I'll start a script and I'll say, okay, well, this didn't happen the way I wanted to. Let me just start to log out some information so I can kind of trace back and see what it is that's going right or wrong with my scene. Why didn't that get called, or why is that variable something that, why is it something different than I thought it was going to be? Where's this error coming from? That kind of stuff. So in the long short of it, that's exactly how we use the game view and how the console view comes into play when you're actually putting your Unity project together.